What's going on, everybody? Welcome back, and today we're going to be doing a review of a ride that is one of my favorite rides at Six Flags Over Texas. It's called the New Texas Giant. But before we start the video, if you're new to the channel, I would encourage you to hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications for daily videos. If you want to help support the channel in any way, smash that like button and share the video. Before we get into the ride review, let's talk a little bit about the history of Texas Giant. Texas Giant originally debuted in March the 17th, 1990. And when it opened, it at the time was the tallest wooden roller coaster in the world. That's pretty significant considering that the ride at the time was only 143 feet tall. But that was then, this is now. It debuted in 1990, and over a period of time, anybody that's ever rode it know that the ride, the pacing of the ride was kind of the same, but the ride just overall became very, very rough, and it was significantly rough. So Six Flags on November 1st, 2009, shut the ride down. They didn't shut the ride down because the ride was rough and it was just horrible. They didn't tell the general public what was going on, and then a couple months later they took down the Texas Giant sign, donated it to the Roller Coaster Museum. Over a period of time, I do believe the following year, that's when Six Flags had made the announcement that they had spent $10 million to refurbish the ride, stating that the ride would be much faster and much smoother. The last day of operation for the Texas Giant was November 1st, 2009. And on April 22nd, 2011, the ride will be done with getting refurbished by Rocky Mountain Construction. After the refurbishment, the ride was renamed to be called the New Texas Giant. Rocky Mountain Construction came in and refurbished it on April 22nd, 2011. It made its miraculous resurrection from the dead as the New Texas Giant. Pretty much, they took a lot of the bad stuff out, and there's still the same amount of track there. It's just the layout's different. It's overall a better layout with bank turns and a better first drop. They raised the lift hill by 10 feet, which made the first drop 10 feet taller. I do believe that the original Texas Giant had a 53-degree first drop, whereas the New Texas Giant has a 79-degree first drop. Pretty significant. New Texas Giant is probably one of the premier rides at Six Flags Over Texas. It stands at a total height of 153 feet tall, with a first drop of 147 feet, reaching top speeds of 65 miles an hour with 4,900 feet of track and a 79-degree first drop with a ride duration of 2 minutes, hitting up at almost 4.5 Gs. The thing that I noticed the very first time I rode this ride, it was really new for me, was the ride restraints. The ride restraints are different than any other ride. They're lap bars and seat belts, but these types of lap bars are special, strictly for, I think they're strictly for RMC type rides. You'll see them on New Texas Giant and Iron Rattler and Six Flags Fiesta Texas. They're kind of like the saddle lap bars, where they cover the entire base of your torso, so to speak, not to mention the seat belt. When I first rode this thing, I had quite a few experiences on wooden roller coasters, but I had never had the opportunity to ride a hybrid, which was wooden roller coaster with steel track. I didn't really know what to expect, but I did not expect what I expected to expect when I expected the ride to be good. If you catch on to that one, then we're going to be good friends. But the ride was very, very smooth. Did not feel like a wooden roller coaster at all. And it was, I feel like it played to the advantages of the layout itself. New Texas Giant focuses more on bank turns and airtime hills than anything else in the ride. And that's something that really stood out to me. This ride here is a backseat ride. If you want a smoothest experience possible, you don't really care about airtime, then you can ride it in the middle towards the front. You'll have a good time and you'll really enjoy yourself. This ride is made for different kinds of riders. You've got these new riders that tend to try to stay to the middle of the car, maybe even the front, because some people have this fear of not seeing where they're going. So they tend to want to stay towards the front. Then you have just normal riders, your casual rider that doesn't really care to see where they're going, doesn't want to sit in the back because they don't too much care for the airtime, so they decide to sit in the middle. And then you've got people like me that want the best experience possible, want the biggest thrill of all time, so we like to sit in the back because we thrive and we live for airtime, baby. So we sit back there on just about every ride that's going to have airtime because that's where we get the most of it. So based on what type of rider you are, would probably definitively say where you would be comfortable sitting at on the ride. When the ride leaves the station, it takes a chain lift hill up 153 feet. It moves at a fairly quick speed, so it takes you about 45 seconds to get up the lift hill. The first drop is great. It's nothing crazy, but after the first drop, it picks up quite a bit of speed if you're running a full train, and it runs the course. The things that stuck out the most to me were the significant amounts of airtime that were going on throughout this ride. You get a little bit of airtime on the first drop. Right before you hit the mid-course break, you get a pop of airtime shortly before that. You get a big idea of ejector airtime. You get course break, and then as like 3/4 of the way through the ride, there's a big airtime hill going towards the queue line. That's very noticeable in the back. Disadvantages to the ride. This ride starts out really, really strong, but pacing issues throughout the middle and the second half of the ride really puts into question of what could have actually happened towards the end of the ride. I'm not really sure if Six Flags kind of prematurely opened the ride because, money or them just wanting to have the ride done or what happened, but there's a lot of pacing issues in the second half of the ride. Right after you get that big airtime hill going towards the queue line, you make a right turn and you go through a couple of tunnels, and it's just nothing. It's just a whole lot of nothingness. And you can tell obviously based on the pacing of the ride before that, and then when you get to that part, it's kind of like, what are we doing here? So there's pacing issues towards the second half of the ride, and that's where they take your picture, which to the general public would be a really good spot because it gets their reaction after the ride's over. But for an enthusiast point of view, the pacing issues on the second half of the ride don't really make it a bad ride. It just makes it very, very noticeable that there should have been something more put on there, like maybe some more bank turns or maybe even a 0G roll or something. But at the time, they didn't really. I don't know if they didn't have the technology or if they didn't want to do it, but they ended up doing it with their next RMC, which is Iron Rattler. But that's really the only bad disadvantage we have is the pacing issues throughout the ride. The ride starts strong. It's got a lot of airtime. It's got a great first drop. I ride this thing just about every time I go to Six Flags Over Texas. We won't be going back to Six Flags Over Texas until probably later in the summer. Because we've got our June vacation coming up here pretty quick. But aside from that, it's an amazing ride. It's at a pretty good location. It's right next to Titan, so you can ride that and then jump over on Titan, or ride Titan and then jump back over to it. It's completely and totally up to you. If I had to kind of rate this ride, I would have to rate it based on the airtime, the amount of airtime. But also the pacing issues are in they're kind of, it's questionable, the pacing issues, if it's really a big problem to give it a bad score. I don't really think it is because the pacing issues don't last that long. It's kind of like just for like less than a few seconds, like 10, 20 seconds long, so I really don't think it should be worth giving the ride a bad score. I'm going to give this ride an 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10. 10 being the greatest roller coaster I've ever ridden. So I'm going to give it an 8. It's a great ride. If you go to Six Flags Over Texas, definitely worth checking out and definitely worth getting a good ride in. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about the review, if you disagree, if you agree, and we will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.